Hi, and welcome to the video portion of my somatic warm-up. So my warm-up will be preparing me for a ballet class as well as most dance classes. The movements presented are dynamic and tailor towards my iliopsoas tendinopathy, while also producing a full body warm-up. Enjoy. Beginning with a cardiovascular warm-up, which is used to increase heart rate and blood flow, I will start by jogging, which is the action of dorsiflexing and plantar flexing the ankles to help propel you as you jog, while creating slight flexion at the hip and knee joints. I will continue to do this for about a minute. I will now be transitioning into the cardiovascular activity of jumping jacks, which is the movement of abducting and adducting the arms and legs while also dorsiflexing and plantar flexing the ankles. I will do about 30 sets of these, therefore I will do this for about 30 seconds of my warm-up. The final cardiovascular exercise will be high knees, which is the action of dorsiflexing and plantar flexing the ankles with added knee and hip flexion while alternating right and left legs, and I will do about 35 of these, therefore I will do it for about 35 seconds. Now entering the segment of dynamic stretches, which are used to promote greater elasticity of the tissues by increasing the body temperature. I will start with toe touches, with alternating flexion and extension at the knee joints, which is the action of flexing in the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine, where there is also hip flexion present, which then allows for spine extension. The dynamic action taking place can be defined as plantar flexion at the ankle and then into dorsiflexion and knee flexion. I will do about 25 of these, therefore for about 25 seconds. Now transitioning into lunges, which is being presented by the action of flexing the right hip and knee and extending the left hip and knee posteriorly with dorsiflexion at both ankles. The right hand is on the right knee and the left hand is on the ground with both wrists in extension. The dynamic portion is shown as bouncing the left hip into hyperextension and then back to extension to create further elongation of muscle fibers. There is then a transition period into toe touch position and switching to the other side to repeat the same actions. This will go on for about 1 minute and tailor towards extending the iliopsoas muscle. In order to stretch out my back, I will move into cobra pose, which is the action of walking my hands out anteriorly from toe touch position and into plank position. There will be flexion at the shoulders and extension at the knee and hip. Then, by extending my hips and dropping them to the floor, and then transitioning into cobra pose, where the cervical spine extends while also extending the elbows and wrists, plantar flexing the ankles and retracting the scapula. Finishing the cycle, I will flex my spine and elbows to resting position, and then flexing the spine, hips, and knees into child's pose with dorsiflexion at the ankles, and then extending back into standing position with flexion at the spine and protraction at the scapula. I will repeat this entire cycle 5 times, therefore allowing for about 40 seconds of the warm-up. I will conclude the dynamic stretches with double leg bridges, which is the action of lying on the back and bending both knees into flexion. With pronation of the radio-ulnar joint, I raise my hips into extension while my knees remain in flexion and ankles are in dorsiflexion. I then lower my hips back into neutral position, where my rectus abdominis uses eccentric contraction to control my descend. I repeat this cycle 10 times, therefore giving myself about 1 minute and 20 seconds for this warm-up. Now entering the strengthening phase of my warm-up, I use this phase to strengthen the gluteal medius. Here I am performing abducting leg raises, which start by laying on the right lateral side of the body and support the skull with the right hand and left wrist extended for support in front of the abdominals. Keeping the right knee and hip rested in flexion, I extend the left leg and knee into abduction while the left hip works in flexion, pulsing the leg into abduction and adduction to strengthen the gluteal medius, iliopsoas, and rectus abdominis. I repeat this movement 30 times on each side, therefore this warm-up will last for about 1 minute. Now transitioning into a slightly more cardiovascular strengthening segment, I begin with plank walkouts. Starting in anatomical position and then flexing the spine down into downward dog position, where the hips and shoulders are in flexion and the knees and wrists are in extension. Then finally walking the hands out to plank position, where the anatomical positions stay the same, except the hips are now in extension. Then the end of the cycle includes walking the hands back to downward dog position and then flexing the spine and protracting the scapula. I repeat this cycle 10 times, therefore allowing for about 2 minutes of the warm-up. I conclude the strengthening segment with Russian twists. They begin by sitting on top of the ischial tuberosities with the legs hovering above the ground into knee flexion and hip flexion with the abdominals engaged. The ankles stretch into plantar flexion and hands clasp together into fists. The spine will then proceed to rotate right and left to the opposite side. I repeat this movement 30 times, therefore allowing for about 30 seconds of the warm-up. Finally, I will begin my ballet preparation with an ankle warm-up. I will begin by sitting on top of my ischial tuberosities and extending my leg and knee joint forward while keeping flexion at the hip joint. I will proceed to alternate dorsiflexing and plantar flexing my ankles, both in anatomical position and eversion at the foot. I will do 10 sets, both in eversion and anatomical position, therefore for about 25 to 30 seconds of the warm-up. And for my final warm-up exercise, I will do pliés at the bar, which will begin with my right hand on the bar, and relaxation of my left arm with slight flexion in my wrist and elbow joint. I will then keep my feet in eversion and ankles in dorsiflexion with the calcaneus of each foot touching. The movement will include flexion at the knees and hips and slight extension at the spine during the descending action, which will be eccentric. The ascending action, being powered by concentric contraction, works to extend the knee and hip joint. I will do about 8 counts of each plie and 10 on each side, therefore allowing for about 1 minute and 20 seconds of the warm-up. Thank you for watching. Now that my body is fully warm for a ballet class and my iliopsoas muscle feels loosened, I am now able to perform with greater ability and protection from further injury.